Do you want a little kitchen fail?
Love a little kitchen fail.
A little kitchen fail. I've got a little quick one for you.
Have you got a little quick one?
I've got a little quick one. This is from Brenda.
Hi, Brenda.
Hi, Brenda. She says, hello, Sorted Food. As a young woman, trying to impress my boyfriend...
Sorry, Brenda is not young. Oh, coming from a Barry. Trust me, there aren't many young Barrys and there aren't many young Brendas out there.
I think Brenda was alluding to the fact that
30
when
years
she was
ago,
young,
they found each other.
Yeah.
when Brenda was young, she could still be young.
Okay,
She could still be young.
I doubt it, 'cause
You're...
I'm not. I'm 36.
Yeah, good
37.
Whoa. Hello, Sorted Food.
Hello.
As a young woman, trying to impress my boyfriend with my baking abilities, I bought a boxed brownie mix. The instructions said, mix by hand. So I did. I had brownie mix up to my elbows.
Yes. Well done. That's my favourite.
That's the one.
P.S. He married me anyway.
No. With the dirty chocolatey hands.
So simple. That's so effective.
That's great.
I love that.
It reminds me of the story of somebody who works here at Sorted, he's not the best of cooks,
No.
and he takes things incredibly literally. And he was once making custard from bird's custard powder, and he was reading the instructions on the back, and it, add in the custard powder and mix with 2 spoons. So he thought, that's a bit odd. He stood there stirring it with 2 spoons. Line break, 2 spoons of sugar. Well, there was a line break, and he just so literal. He was just stood there mixing it with 2 spoons.
That's amazing.
One thought process at a time.
Your literal packaging fails. I like the idea of that. Send those in. These are excellent.
Well, you have... surely if you're writing the copy on those things, you have to think of the lowest common denominator. You have to think...
No, you do it on purpose.
Yeah.
You make it cryptic so that you know that there will be a percentage of people who follow this literally. That's great. Mixed with 2 spoons of sugar. Lovely stuff.
And the people who will take it most literally, kids. Segue to schools. Segue to our amazing guest today.
You love a segue.
Chefs in schools, and Nicole, who is an absolute hero.
She's a proper powerhouse.
So am I right in saying that she was working in one of the top restaurants in London, in Soho, gave it all up to go and teach kids how to cook better in schools?
It's one of those stories where somebody got given an opportunity and kind of had the choice of direction to take. Do I follow the career path that I've always thought I wanted, or do I go down and do something that I'm passionate about? Follow my heart kind of thing. And I think she made the right decision, and I think thousands of kids would probably agree with her.
Transforming not just like the teaching of, food for kids, but also the eating. So canteens, much better food in schools, and turning the whole thing as part of an education. And, Mike, she's a Malteser.
Yeah, we got to talk about your stag do.
So if you want to hear some stories about Mike's stag do, stick around for our amazing chat with Nicole.
I don't remember anything about Malta. It's such a shame.
Nicole, welcome to our pub and welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, and very happy to be here.
Good. Now, as we get settled in, we get a drink, we'd like to ask the first question, which is always a bit of a thinker, I think is probably the right way of describing it. What would you describe as your foodgasm? So the dish, the setting, the people that you're with that would just give you the most ultimate joy that you could ever imagine.
So I have always been obsessed with fish heads. So
obviously,
I think,
Well, there's a curveball.
As a child as well, I have really strong memories of just thinking that the fish head was actually the main meal. It wasn't the body.
Okay.
And so that would be my number one meal. Obviously, I'm starting this off quite weirdly, so I'll try and move back. In a pub with the people I work with.
Lovely.
Excellent. Perfect. Maybe that's a good place to start, is your childhood. Where were you exposed to fish heads? And what was your growing up? What was your relationship with food as a family, and sort of where you grew up?
So I grew up in Malta, which is a small island, very, very small. You can actually go around the island in 25 minutes by car. And my family have and still actually own restaurants. So the curiosity around food and being around food 24 hours a day meant that obviously thinking obviously I used to think eating fish heads was the norm. I remember being quite young and making tortellini or helping, do little jobs like cutting bread. They're actually my first memories.
Oh, really?
I used to go to school about 5 minutes away from one of the restaurants. So I used to leave school and walk and spend just hours watching chefs prep. And I think that's where my love for food started. And then, like most teenagers, the last thing you want to do is do anything your parents did.
Yep.
And I kept that going up until I was about 19. And I was traveling and I needed money. And I realized, because I had been observing quite a lot of the sort of recipes, I found it was something quite easy that I learned. And as you know, chefs learn most of the time by example or by seeing something. So I had, a whole childhood of seeing food being made. So I found it really easy to work in a kitchen and then not leave for another 20 years. So
I think that's beautiful. I've always find it amazing how even now as trends we see an addiction to watching chefs cook.
Yeah.
And you see food entertainment shows, whether it's like the likes of MasterChef, Chef's Table of the last sort of decade on Netflix. Every new restaurant that opens, it's an open plan kitchen. People love to watch chefs do their thing, and yet there's not a huge amount of doing that thing at home. It becomes something we want to watch and absorb, but we don't actually put our hands to work and try it. So I think like that innate love of watching chefs is fascinating. That's been from a very, very young age for you.
It's theatrical, and I think when you watch in an open kitchen, for me it's like watching, a well-rehearsed dance. Everything, this is how you have a really good service, is everything has a place and,
choreography to it.
Everyone knows what they're doing.
Yeah, and I think, so from a non-chef's perspective, that is 100% what it is. And that's why I do find it absolutely amazing when you see the chefs, and it is choreography. They're dancing around each other. Everything is perfectly placed. They know where everything goes. Everything is done to perfection. And it's the opposite of what happens when I get into the kitchen and start cooking. So there is just this, it is awe-inspiring to go and view that happening. So yeah, for me, the open kitchen thing has been a massive kind of revelation in gaining an appreciation of food, because I can't do that.
And, taking it back to what I do every day currently, I think it's the food education that's also really important with what Chefs in Schools does in schools. It's not just changing food, it's also changing food education. And that theatrical curiosity and awe is what kids love when you want to get them to eat things like fish heads or beetroots. We've never tried fish heads, and I keep on going back, so I just want to say that we have
It's just a life goal. You're aiming for
that. But, loads of lessons around, different types of vegetables, lessons around eggs, how to make bread. And that's the engagement. I always used to think I had never taught before I had gone and worked in a school. But it's a natural. And because kids are so excited to see what you're doing, they're also quite good and well behaved
and
most
put the energy
of the time.
in and the attentiveness.
Because it's all about, we used to walk into the classrooms with just a box of different fish, and that could be an hour of a lesson, where they're looking at, things like mussels and mackerel and anything that, our fish supplier would send.
Would you cut the heads off first and then mix them up a bit and go, which head goes with which body? Yeah.
That is really good.
That'd be a good game, actually.
You try to gamify everything.
I mean, we have a challenge for you, but that's going to be the next challenge if we come here again, because that's a really good idea for food education. Just match the heads to the fish.
So focusing in on your growing up in Malta, so we have spent 3 days in Malta, and I think we saw absolutely zero cultural.
I had a lovely
parts.
rabbit dish and some wonderful octopus at the beach club.
You did, but we all had burgers and more beers.
Because we were on Mike's Stag Do, and it was such a shame to go such a beautiful place and not see it. Rabbit's a big ingredient in Malta, right?
Rabbit and octopus.
I had both, ticked both of those boxes. What other delights?
Yeah, we had beef burger and then chicken burger, I think, actually. Yeah.
What other delights did we miss out on from Malta?
A lot of fish. I mean, in Malta, most of the restaurants work with a fisherman, especially in summer. The fisherman comes in and you buy the whole catch, so you don't pick, and then you can go up. A lot of the restaurants have, I don't know if you saw on a stag do, you'd go
pretty much a fridge and you point at what you want.
Exactly.
Rather than a menu.
So you pay by weight. The cooking is always very simple. A lot of it's done on fire or in salt. It's quite classic.
In salt baked?
Yeah. So
interesting.
The reason why most of the time is it keeps the fish really moist, whereas if you grill it over fire sometimes and it's not wrapped in anything, then it tends to dry out. So the methods are very simple, but it's guaranteed that it would have been brought in that morning, and you get the freshest of ingredients with regards to fish. It's funny because there is a lot of vegetarian. We fill a lot of vegetables with different ingredients. That's quite a classic. So you get the marrow filled with rice or quinoa. But yeah, and burgers, obviously, because you both had. We
found burgers. Yeah, we found a pirate ship. We went on a big boat party.
We're pretty much telling the story just so we can overlay all the photos from Mike's stag over the edit. On YouTube.
The terrible shirt night. Yeah, we had a good time, but it was one of those ones where and we travel quite a lot with what we do for Sorted, and when we go on one of those kind of weekends, it does always feel really bad to go, we're here, but we're only going to see this little portion of the island, and actually we could have been in any destination, and it was there because the weather was lovely and we had a fantastic time, but you don't really feel like you make the most of being in Malta. So I think
had great rabbit and great octopus.
Congratulations.
Which you couldn't really have anywhere else. I mean, you can't have that in Shoreditch.
No. And no one took the mickey out of you for the whole
Not
night.
Maybe you can't, to be fair.
Not once. But it's interesting. So you're talking about all this wonderful food from Malta. I'm pretty sure that we have eaten and enjoyed your food twice before, and yet I don't think we've ever really met. So perhaps you can talk us about some of the places that you've worked previously, and then we'll throw in the whether we've eaten there at the time that you were there, because I'm pretty sure there's lots of overlap. So
I started the Corinthia in Embankment is a Maltese hotel, and the recruitment was in Malta. So I came over. I was recruited in Malta to work in the kitchen, and I worked under a Michelin star chef for a year, which was great. And then straight away went to the Modern Pantry, which you mentioned, under Anna Hansen, which was, I think when you're doing line work, I think, it's as thrilling as, the hardest job that you do. But, you're running on adrenaline and you love food. So a 16-hour shift, you think I'm in love with what I do. And I did the Modern Pantry for about a year, and then went to the Electric, which is part of Soho House. And then finally, one of Ottolini's restaurants, Nopi, which, I still love. And, I loved my time there. And I still text once in a while and say, or at least I think about texting and saying, would it be possible to come and spend a shift? And I think, the love of food, I worked under a chef called Scully, and coming from Malta, a lot of ingredients are fresh, but they are it's a basic encyclopedia of ingredients that you have, whereas with Scully, the ingredients that we used to use I had never come across before, the combination of flavors, the cooking styles as well, and I loved every bit of it. And
again, an open kitchen. Yeah, so being clean and having the right coloured J-clots for the right sections, that kind of OCD is always
It's different coloured J-cloths for different sections.
If you were on meat, then you'd have red J-cloths. If you were on fish, you'd have blue J-cloths. If you were on veg, you'd have yellow J-cloths.
I mean, that just sounds like one reason that I wouldn't be able to work in a professional kitchen. I'm colourblind, and so that just wouldn't work for me.
It's the same as the chopping boards and the alike in kitchens.
Skills-wise, I'd be fine, but I think it's...
the cleanliness, because those beautiful open tables and lots of sort of marble in that environment, and I think, and we were looking at your sort of phenomenal chefing CV before doing what you're doing now, and we'll come on to that in a second, and we were looking at the overlap, and we're pretty sure we've done 2 different Christmas sorted team lunches at those places when you were there. So we went to the Modern Pantry for a Christmas get together, and we were at Nopi with some of our work direct with YouTube, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Which again was Christmas.
I also feel like we ate in the Modern Pantry a lot because we were working with an agency nearby.
And just across the road. Yeah. So it was always a go-to. Amazing food and amazing just vibes.
Yeah, I remember things like, one of the head chefs would be like, go and get siesta from the fridge, or, go and get tonka bean. I had never come across it, so I'd just stand in the fridge and think, what does a siesta look like, and what am I going to go down with?
Hoping it's not one of those pranks, because we used to send the comedy chefs, can you go and get the salmon legs? Or, it was always send them to get the thing that doesn't exist and see how long they spend in the fridge looking for it.
So at some point you had this kind of revelation of, I don't want to work in kitchens anymore. What happened?
I don't know, you come to points in your life, and it wasn't what I was doing, but you come to points in your life where you feel you just need to be doing something else, and I had this great feeling that I felt I needed to do something else that was slightly different. As you know, with most CVs and chefs, you go from one restaurant to another under people that you hugely respect, but you don't really do anything different apart from, if it's a restaurant, then you might pick a cafe. And I knew I wanted to do something that was slightly different with regards to how my relationship with food would be. And there was a tweet by Henry Dimbleby to be a school chef in his children's school in Hackney called Gayhurst. And a friend of mine was joking. He said, well, you're never going to work breakfast, so I think this is perfect because you never work weekends, and it's with children. And from that moment I thought, why is this not commonly known? Why is this role not one of the most important roles a chef can feel that they could do in their life, even if it's for a short period of time? Because the sense that you're giving back, and the sense that you're giving back those skills, paying forward your knowledge about food, getting kids curious about ingredients, I think, it just seemed like it was, as simple as one of the most natural things that a chef could be doing with their career.
And I think growing up, sort of school canteens and food in them had a particularly sort of bad stereotype, and I think we're talking sort of UK centric here, but they weren't particularly the best places for the best food. I actually think the school we went to, so Chancellor School in Brookman's Park in Hertfordshire, I remember the school...
Hashtag ad, or...
I think I'm giving some credit to the kitchen team there, because I ate in the school canteen every single day for 7 years, every school day. Didn't go in the weekends.
You would have done if you
could. I would have done if I could. But the food there I thought was really good. They always had a fresh option, and then there were always a lot of sort of pre-prepared options as well. And there was a lot of love and care, but I think the stereotype of the schools and the challenges of cooking for that many people within the restrictions they have is really tough. I wonder if, I know the sort of the schools you're working in now, again, we'll get to the brilliance of that, but what are the restrictions and challenges that most schools have in order to provide good food?
I would like to think that what we're doing is showing that it can be done, and therefore the challenges that everybody think are challenges actually have solutions. We're a very solution focused charity. We think, right, we can feed 100 schools in a small primary school in a corner in Devon, and we could feed 2,000 students in a secondary school in Hackney. And we're constantly trying to find schools where we can show it can work, and different challenges that we haven't come across, that we think, right, we're going to take this challenge and show that there are solutions. We're not saying that it's easy, but we're saying that it's possible. Budgets always come up. So financially, you're trying to provide a great meal within 90p to £1 for every child per day. And when you start looking at what you want to provide, then automatically, you start thinking, how can I get the best quality tomato on the plate? How can I get the best piece of chicken, the best piece of fish? most of our schools, we always recommend making bread from scratch. Desserts are always 50% fruit or vegetables. We make, a great pea cake, call it the Hulk cake. So it's trying to be innovative, move away from a lot of sort of healthy connotations with food, and we say it's food cooked from scratch, made by people who care, and it's full of flavor. And I guess that's the key, that when you have a trained, valued kitchen team who are enjoying what they're doing and properly supported by senior leadership, and honestly, I think I have come across the most loyal, hardworking kitchen teams in school kitchens. The food that they're producing in this environment of feeling valued and feeling that they're contributing to the community. The best jollof rice I have ever had was in a school kitchen, and when I tried to do it, I think it was a year before I was allowed to do it properly, because I kept on putting the chili in at the wrong time. I'm really impatient. I need everything in straight away, and I'm always thinking everything. So the recipes that you'd find in school kitchens that you can unlock as well. I mean, I learned a lot. Hopefully I did some teaching, but I learned a lot with regards to bread making, with a lot of the Moroccan style dishes that we have in our school kitchens, jollof rice, and we continue learning from the teams as well. And I think it's really important to kind of appreciate the hard work that the kitchens teams all over are contributing. It gets underestimated sometimes.
So how big was that shift going from working in a professional kitchen environment to working in a school kitchen, where I imagine you probably still have incredibly demanding customers? Some are paying in the professional kitchen world, but at schools they're not paying, and they're kids who don't necessarily hold back their opinions and things like that. How big was that shift? Because I
mean, kids are the most honest customers you will ever have. Sometimes the idea is that you're like, just try a bit. I'm like, no.
Yeah, that's a daily challenge at home. Yeah.
Just try a little bit. No, I don't like it. It's the wrong colour. And obviously, as you can imagine, it's volume. And I think, we've now supported about 81 chefs to go from the hospitality industry to school kitchens. And I think the first question or the first look of panic is, how do you cook 60 kilos of pasta, regardless where you've come from? It's like just the look of terror. And it's like you start at 8 o'clock in the morning and you finish cooking the pasta at about midday.
Wow.
And you don't do anything else. So it's the upscaling of recipes as well, the volume that you're working with, the volume that you're ordering as well, and understanding the portion sizes, communicating with, however the school wants to communicate with parents and children, because the stakeholders are not only the children at primary school, it's the parents as well that you're winning over, the community, the school teaching community as well. It's really good that, there's a whole school food approach, so everybody is, working together to make sure that, children are enjoying the meals that you are serving.
Perhaps it's a good time just to consider what Chefs in Schools is as an organisation. You mentioned Henry Dimbleby, who some people may know sort of began and founded Leon, and has done an awful lot around the school system, as has also worked on the National Food Strategy. So hugely influential in sort of making change and change makers. But perhaps you could explain a little bit more about what Chefs in School is as a charity and how it operates.
Yes, sure. So our mission is to help improve children's health through food and food education, plate by plate, school by school. And we're very impatient. We're driven by wanting to change. And like I said, we do this through food and food education. Obviously, Henry Dimbleby wrote the school food standards. So all our schools, we have a training program. We go into schools, and they're not only schools that are in-house, because 30% of schools are in-house, 70% are, the provision is contracted to an outside provider. The training program is to work across all school settings to teach things like nutrition, school food standards, simple things like garnishing as well. I think sometimes we underestimate the power of food, eating with your eyes. We were founded by Henry Dimbleby Louise Nichols, who's the exec head teacher of one of the primary schools I originally worked with, and myself. We're an amazing, passionate team of over 20 employees, and I think the best thing about Chefs in Schools is the drive that we have internally and the hope to think that we're able to make a change. We work with other charities as well. There's a lot of good out there that we'd like to showcase through our social media within school food, and it's making sure sort of that we're empowering kitchen teams to do what is essentially a really important job.
You mentioned education there. I mean, how much of that spills outside of perhaps the lunch hour? Because we talk about food in schools and we think about the canteen and that sort of lunch break, whatever time, 45 minutes, an hour or more, and that's the time when the kids are fed. But how does the education either feed into that hour or does it sit outside of that as well?
So, like you mentioned, fundamentally we believe food is education. The dining hall, we do see it as a classroom. Anything that is outside that hour is also food education. It could be growing a few herbs outside the kitchen door. It could be in the classroom, the teacher reading the menu before the students come out for their lunch service. It's sort of all the small things that happen throughout the day that help improve food literacy within a school. A lot of our schools have now food education lessons, and that it ranges across all our schools. We have a school that work with Leeds Academy for food education in secondary as well as in primary. And a lot of schools are, growing to the extent of having farms on site as well. And I think that not only means that there is an appreciation of food, but also an understanding of what they're eating. And an excitement around wanting to eat, leaves, for example, which is crazy. They're at the gate going, can we just eat some green leaves? And you think, how have we managed to do this? This is amazing. We obviously, in collaboration with LEAP Federation, have built a Hackney School of Food, which is dedicated purely to teach children about food in a space where they can forage and then go into the kitchen and cook what they've just foraged, and spend time. They have chickens on site, which is amazing. It's very calming as well for a lot of children. And once again, I think we're so far removed from our food that the more education you have in a school setting to help us, reconnect with food and empower kids through food. Things like food education and the Hackney School of Food are really important.
It feels incredibly important. It feels incredibly powerful. And I think we wouldn't be sitting on this sofa with you if that kind of thing had been in place when we were at school. And the only reason we're here is because we didn't get that kind of education at school, and we left school without knowing it. And we were texting you because you were training to be a chef, and we needed to get that info from somewhere. But and I think it's one of those things that's then, obviously it's inspired us and what we do, and we're still doing it 14, 15 years later, which is great. But I've now got 2 kids, and I want to make sure that they don't end up in that same position. And it's one of those things of, it shouldn't be that because you have kids, that's the only way that you should be able to relate to it. But
a connection to food and where it comes from.
Exactly. And it was when my daughter was probably about 2-3 years old, we were on this, we went to a farm, and we were looking at the pigs, and she went, "Daddy, is that where bacon comes from?" And I said, "Yeah, it is." And it's something that we talked about before. And, as I say, I wanted to make sure that I was instilling that kind of information within her. And so I said, yes, it is. And I just saw this mum cup the ears of their child who was standing nearby and walked her away and tutted at me. And I was like, well, she's not lying. It's not untrue. This is completely, and there is a respect of when do you pass this information on to children. But it was just one of those moments of going, okay, you're not ready for that. Yeah. But it does feel like such an important thing for people to be able to, and especially children, to be able to appreciate where their food comes from, because otherwise all they see is a packet in a supermarket, and they don't connect that chicken that's walking around over there with that chicken breast that's wrapped up in plastic.
And a big part of that is where you grow up, and I appreciate it's also a lot more difficult for like city kids and inner city kids, and it's very different from observing a family of restaurants and fish heads in Malta, and we were very lucky being brought up around food and food families, but it's not always as easy as that. So how do you bring that into the wonderful kind of safe space of a school and provide that opportunity?
I mean, when we get asked, what do we do? I think when children have enough nutritious food, they're able to learn, thrive, understand food, but also make the right choices. You know, we work with a school that has a farm. The kids help rear the animals, and then they know the process of what happens to those animals. And then the animals come back and they have a choice to either have it on the menu or have the vegetarian option. And that's, you know, back to the story of,
it's empowering,
you
and
know,
choice.
the bacon.
Yeah.
You're understanding the cycle, and then you're making the right choice. I do think that, you know, the high streets are flooded with advertisement for fast foods, and you know, it's cheap and filling, but it's, you know, as we know, the appreciation of good food is what Chefs in Schools is trying to do with the kitchens that we work with.
And it's always a challenge, because those foods that are nutritious, you know, broccoli, mushrooms, carrots and peppers, they don't have a marketing budget behind them. So in terms of fighting for all of the, you know, the processed food, the brands that we are constantly surrounded by, and so many of them are convenient and we use them, you know, every week at times, but they all have a P&L and they all have a bottom line and a marketing budget to make sure that it's in the right place and seen by the right people. Broccoli, mushrooms, cherry tomatoes don't have that. So in that sense, you're doing that work by presenting them. You mentioned garnishes earlier, which is something I'd just like to ask kind of what you mean by that, because we do eat with our eyes to some extent, and you've had a huge career in restaurants where food is put down in front of a diner, and I used to work in an open plan kitchen, and I used to love, it was almost an orchestration when a table would have savoury food put down in front of them, and they would all lean in almost simultaneously to smell it. But if it was a dessert, they would often lean back to appreciate and look at it, and you could almost watch the choreography of a restaurant and tell whether what course they were on based on whether they were leaning in or out together based on what it looks like. How are you doing that when you're serving hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of meals in an hour in a school? How are you achieving that?
It's amazing what sort of we would think is garnished. And I'll give you an example. I would have this habit of sprinkling herbs over potatoes, and then I'd see a child just come sitting down, taking all the herbs off each potato and have a little pile of herbs on the side. So it's understanding what garnish actually means, but the presentation on the plate, I think that just understanding what looks good, what colours to have on there. You know, a lot of vibrant colours I think are really attractive. Having different components that children can then pick. What's really become successful in primary and secondary schools is the concentration of an amazing salad table, both in secondary and in primary. And, you know, there's these amazing sort of, you know, 20 different big platters of colourful, you know, pickles, olives.
It's inviting.
And children are also picking what they want on their plate as well. So with that, then it's most of the time guaranteed that they're going to eat it as well. Little things like, you know, I think how with regards to service, there's always sort of a huge serving area, and the huge serving area is big trays of food. And in the online course that we have, it's how to nicely put things in a gastro. So when a child comes up, you know, there's one, an understanding of what the food is, and number two, you just like you said, you kind of want to eat because you eat with your eyes.
Yeah.
first.
You feel part of almost a hospitality service rather than like a factory line of feeding gruel like Oliver Twist, slop, but actually making every plate look beautiful.
Yeah, and the smell, I think, when you were mentioning coming in and coming out, I think sometimes when you walk into a dining hall and it just smells of amazing, either bread or whatever, sort of that aroma of really nice food, I think that's really important as well. I think we eat with our senses.
As a charity, where do you get the funding from? Because I imagine for quite a number of children in the schools, they wouldn't experience this kind of food or this kind of education at home, either because the parents don't have the knowledge, they don't have the experience to be able to do it, they can't afford to get hold of the fresh food and things like that. So for some of the children, this might be the first time they're actually experiencing food at this kind of raw level and kind of the freshness and things. So how does it work?
So children aren't getting enough opportunities to experience food made from fresh produce, and schools are the answer. This is why we believe it's so important to do what we do. At the moment in London, all primary schools get funding to feed children for free, and this has helped massively. Also, there's a lot of funding around equipment. Sometimes you think you're feeding more, but you're actually not giving the teams the training or the tools to do their job. You're asking them to work more with less. So there is a lot of funding that Chefs in Schools has been part of with regards to making sure the equipment in schools is set up correctly. But yeah, at the moment, all primary schools have the opportunity to make sure that children are fed properly. This is why it's so important. I think back again, sort of to keep on remembering that fundamentally when children have a nutritious meal or a plate of food, they're able to learn and thrive much better than if they're eating a lot of junk.
Just engage more in the classroom and everywhere else.
And, ultra processed food, there's a big conversation around it at the moment, but, junk food doesn't have a place in school kitchens, essentially. So
and also, I feel like in a school environment, you're trying to fuel the children throughout the day as well, and actually you want them to have something that means that it's going to give them energy throughout the afternoon, and not have that you have a big lunch and you have a big energy slump straight after.
A bit of a lull. Yeah,
exactly. You want to be able to keep the kids going, which is an amazing thing.
And that's the reason why I think things like vegetables and salads are really good for the children to be topping up themselves with. And obviously throughout, in compliance to school food standards and throughout the week, most chefs work on a balanced menu, making sure there's enough, carbohydrates, protein, enough fruit, veg, fibre. Most of our bread is 50% whole meal. We try and make sure, there's fruit available throughout the day. Children also can come back for seconds. That's one of, our ethos with schools. It's a good opportunity for schools to be providing a really good meal at the moment.
I think what's magical about what you do is that shift of putting trained chefs into that environment. So you think about chefs and your previous life and in working in kitchens, they're busy, they're incredibly long hours, they eat into evenings and weekends. I can see a real attraction to actually picking up those skills and moving them into a Monday to Friday relatively sort of set shift pattern. But on top of that, chefs have this ability to kind of adapt. Nothing ever goes quite to plan. Doesn't matter how many times you've got the booking schedules and the tables booked in at certain times. So a table turns up late and you get a real rush, and then something runs out and a delivery doesn't arrive, and you have to be able to adjust and adapt to all these problems that are thrown at you. What are some of the biggest problems that have happened in kitchens and kind of creative solutions around them, or perhaps just some of the arguably maddest things you're trying to do, like making Moroccan flatbreads for hundreds of people? What are the things that you've kind of found really creative solutions to perhaps challenges?
I mean, to be fair, most of the challenges you mentioned in the restaurant happen in a school.
True.
Especially deliveries not coming in on time, equipment breaking during service, and having to provide, with a restaurant, you can offer complimentary cocktail, and that gains you half an hour.
Does that not go down too well in the school canteen?
Definitely can't be like, if you don't mind, can you choose a cocktail while we get your starters together? So the challenges are the same, and the way that we look at challenges as a chef, it's constantly, trying to find solutions to ongoing problems. And this is not only the chefs that come from the industry, it's also the training that we provide is to set up the right systems that you have less of the ongoing, constant problems that occur.
And the just-in-time panic.
Exactly. We've hired a procurement team. We're now looking at, really tight specs for the suppliers that we work with to come in at deliveries to be in a window of time. So the setup that Chefs and Schools looks at, and the training as well, is to eliminate the number of challenges, to work smarter, not harder. That's what we try and keep on, instilling. And to understand that, even in a school setting, things happen to go wrong. But unfortunately,
there's still going to be a few hundred children, regardless of what happened. There's still going to be hungry children wanting to be fed at lunchtime.
Without the option of offering them any complimentaries. If they go
just discount your bill at the end.
Exactly. If you don't mind, come into the VIP section to the left and wait here.
Take 10% off the bill at the end.
The work that you're doing feels so important to me, because it feels like it's an investment in the future of the next generations. The children of today are going to become the teenagers, and then the workers, and the of the next few generations, and the people who are going to be taking up space within the NHS, for instance, because of diabetes being on the rise and things like that. Just learning about food from a young age, I think, can have a massive impact later on in life. And it does feel like an investment rather than a cost.
No, definitely. And this is what we say, like, ideally when they leave school, they can feed themselves better, appreciate food, respect the planet a bit more, and share their knowledge with the community as well. It's not only them learning about food, but it's them being able to pay it forward as well. So that's essentially what you'd want, a teenager to leave school. And like you said, I mean, a lot in lockdown, the stories of hearing what students were eating in university, I think we were all, why would you not be able to boil some pasta and make a simple sauce? If it is education in a school, it's, life skills, essentially.
It sounds like some of the menus that you guys put together as well. Probably the first time that some kids have experience to that entire cuisine. You've mentioned jollof rice and sort of Moroccan flatbreads and stews and tagines. What are perhaps maybe the three most popular or favourites, or your favourite kind of dishes that are on the menu that you've crafted? The pea cake sounds really smart, because peas are naturally sweet and wonderful and super nutritious, but perhaps you give us just like a top three, inspire us with three things that you're cooking at hundreds of portions of a day.
I mean, the story of one of the challenges was that the fish delivery, we had to be serving fish at 11 and the fish came in at 10, and we had these huge fillets of hake because we wouldn't ask for them to be portioned for some reason. So we looked at each other and were like, how are we going to cook, 60 kilos of, big fillets of hake, which were beautiful. So the recipe was a portion of hake with tomato sauce. So we put tomato sauce on the bottom of a big tray, put the fish on top, put it in the oven at a really high heat, crisped the skin up, and just served it like that, which was one of the most, because I think with food sometimes, and we served them whole and got the team to serve them and went into the office and closed the door, because we're like, this is the last. I mean, everybody's it's the last of our job here. I mean, there's no way.
Slap a fish on a tray and away you go.
Just like a whole fish. So they're coming up to the counter and like looking at the whole fish, and I was like, it's just going to be meltdown across the board. But they thought it was the best thing. So with a piece of tongs, the servers were just grabbing a portion of fish and putting it on the plate, and it was the best thing. And out of 2 days of portioning fish, it seemed to be a solution. And that's one of my personal favorite recipes. But there's some amazing food. I mean, we have a challenge for you, but also we'd like to invite you for a school lunch.
Excellent.
Another favorite of mine is, jollof rice across the board, and the levels of spice differ according to the teams cooking it, but I think that's one of my favorite rice dishes. Homemade pea pizza. I think we make a homemade pizza across the board of schools that we work with excellently, even though, and this has come up a lot for me recently, like just making simple food really well. A jacket potato with some homemade beans and some cheese. It doesn't have to be mind-blowing. It just has to be
good
has
and
to
made
be
from
good.
scratch. And I think that the connotations of pizza being a fast food takeaway, unhealthy junk food is rubbish. If it's made properly and from scratch with half whole wheat, and it's got some tomato and some veg and it's served with a salad, it's balanced and nutritious.
So yeah, I mean, this is going to give me an opportunity to say, because the comms team are going to want definitely to call out anyone who's interested in food and think they want a career in a school kitchen. We have chefs from across the globe making really good food. The level, I think if you always sort of, when you look at kitchen teams, you look at the skill set across your team. And I think the skill set that we have across the schools that we work with, it's over 120 schools now, through our intensive training and through our training program. And the level of the skill set is just amazing. So
brilliant.
We are very, very lucky to work with such great suppliers and great chefs as well.
So if you could wave a magic wand and take away any of the restrictions that you're currently working with, what would the ultimate chefs in schools situation look like? What would you love to see happen in schools?
That we don't exist. That
Interesting.
The standard of school food is the food that we're providing at the moment. It would be the norm.
So you're working to take yourself out of a job, basically.
Definitely.
I like that.
That's brilliant. And the whole story of the charity as it's built and evolved is absolutely brilliant. So thank you for sharing it
very, very,
with
very
us.
much.
Just before you go, and we might have already covered this in a little way or other, but we have one question we ask everyone, and that's, if everyone listening or watching has to cook one dish in their lifetime, what do you think that dish should be?
A nice bowl of mussels.
A nice bowl of mussels.
Excellent.
Another super easy, nutritious, and at the right time of year, very affordable dish.
And so, at some point, it would be really cool to see mussels on school menus across the schools we work with, definitely.
Great answer. Everyone
with a white wine sauce, or would we go for the cider sauce?
Well, no, definitely. It's although some of the chefs, I always love to say, the wine does evaporate,
ish, mostly some.
Still not supposed to be on site. Let's not even talk about what evaporates or what not.
Oh, Nicole, thank you so much.
Thank
this has been
you
such
very,
a
very
brilliant
much
podcast.
for having us here. It's been brilliant. Thank you.